Welcome to Root to Fruit, conversations with everyday people who shape the Vine School community.
Guys, thank you for joining us. I appreciate your time. It's always as much as it is sharing with the people out there what the school's about, what your experience as parents has been. It's also a blessing for me just to get to know parents more. You don't often get time to sit with parents and chat about this kind of thing. So I think for today, maybe let's start. You could introduce yourselves and then just explain kind of your journey leading to the Vine School. What was the thinking, what was the processes that went into considering the school and then choosing to apply for your kids to come to the Vine School.
Yeah, so we are a family that hasn't grown up in South Africa. Annethea is from Namibia originally. I'm from Germany. We got to know each other in Germany, got married 2013. Our first daughter, Ilse, was born in 2015, the year before we moved to South Africa. And so we work in ministry and research. Annethea is at the Student Y. I'm at the Stellenbosch University Theological Faculty, so researcher and also involved in ministry in Kailicha. And we started looking for a school for Ilse for grade R, and since we are a bilingual family, so we speak Afrikaans and German in the home, we didn't really want our kids to go to the German school because we felt we weren't here to mingle more with the German community, but we wanted to be more with the non-German people in South Africa, in Cape Town. So we were wondering whether it might make sense for her to go to an Afrikaans medium school. What was the school called that we used?
Wynberg.
Wynberg.
Yeah, Wynberg Afrikaans, I think.
Yeah.
Wynberg school.
Yeah. So that's where we looked first, and it wasn't certain at the time that they would actually have an Afrikaans class the following year, because more and more parents wanted their kids to study in English, or maybe they didn't even have Afrikaans as their first language anymore. So we looked at a couple of other schools, and the Vine School had been recommended to us by some people from our church. And at the beginning, we weren't so the fact that it was a Christian school was not a priority for us. But we then came to explore, and we were really impressed by the approach to education, Charlotte Mason's philosophy, and we felt this might be a really good fit. And the fact that it was Christian was then almost an add-on for us, and it has been a wonderful experience since then. That was 6-7 years ago since we first came to the school. Now, other daughter, Emma, who is now in grade 2, is also at the school, has been here for a number of years.
Yeah, I'll just add, it's when you decide on a school, it always seems a very big decision and you're quite stressed about it. I was lucky that with a few moms I listened to this podcast. It's in the States, but they discussed homeschooling, public school and private school in a very good manner, and it helped me. And I think one of the takeaways was, one, it's not like you can make changes if it doesn't work, but secondly also that every family is unique, maybe even every child, so you have to take into account your family situation, the child, what's available, and then make the decision. And the other point is that no school is perfect. So for us, what helped us was we couldn't find a school that had the language maybe that we wanted, but that just means when the school can provide something, it's up to you as parents. So if you're not in a Christian school, you have to focus on that at home if that's important for you. For us, it was the language thing. So if the school can provide that, then that's your responsibility as parents to make up for what maybe a school can't provide. And just that freedom to know that no school will provide everything you maybe want.
And that's the end of our episode. I think that's
It's the intro right there.
highlights reel. We can share that just like every week, you know. Yeah, sure. That's I really enjoyed that insight. It's a different way of looking at it, because one would think that, I mean, being a parent myself recently, you kind of have to shift your mind from looking for this place that will offer everything and be everything to anyone and to everyone, which is not possible for the church or the school, if you think about it. And so, like you say, you have to look at which things can you live with, and which are you not able to compromise on, and make the best of it. So, being at the school now for a number of years, how has it shaped your understanding of children, and perhaps the way you parent? Has it in any way, shape or form changed how you think about education and parenting in particular? And how has the school helped you to kind of parent and reinforce what's done here at home as well?
Yeah. I think for me one very helpful thing was this idea, and it seems very obvious, but seeing a child as a person. The way we were parent often, I come from Afrikaans community, the children were to be seen but not heard. And so that was quite a major thing for me, to really see, okay, they've got their own personalities, and to find that balance between respecting them as a person. So they have feelings and they have ideas and they have opinions, and how do you do that within a structure that includes discipline but also opportunity for them to be who they are and to share, maybe at times to challenge you. Finding that right balance between just saying, look, because I say so, or, let's hear your opinion and we can work on it together, especially as they grow older. So that was definitely one thing. And then it's probably a broader question, but this idea of education not just being the mind, but the full body. I think it also has to do with my work, but I thought a lot about how we do church, how we do education. We focus a lot on the mind and our knowledge, but to extend that, to look at the beauty. I've often seen some of the students just outside looking at a flower, and it does something to you to take that moment to really look, what am I seeing, and to reflect on that, and not always just be, this is a flower, this is very technical. And even listening to music, and just appreciating the beauty of that without always having to dissect it. So that approach of education being more than just words or just books, but also incorporating the whole person and how we feel, etc. So that's two things I can say that's really stood out for me.
I think what I've learned as a parent over the years is that we can be very helpful to our kids if we take their actual needs into account, which can vary from child to child, and to an extent let go of our ideas of how I should discipline or what would be in the best interest of the child, without even looking at what the child may need. So our daughter's personalities are quite different, and I needed to learn that maybe some of the ideas I came with, how a child should behave, needed to be adapted in a way, because I realized, no, our child maybe is unable to behave or to react in a certain way in a certain moment, and I needed to find a more helpful approach for the child that allowed our kids to feel in a place of comfort and safety, and also to find the right times of approaching certain issues, because sometimes they would not be able to maybe give you the response that you desire, but at other times they might. So to just learn to be patient, learn to continually learn as a parent. That was something that, not sure exactly how and to what extent I got that from the school, but I'm sure it's in some way connected to the philosophy of education that is taught here.
I'm interested to know, if you compare your school journey, rewind the clock back, and compare to what you see now in terms of what your girls are experiencing, if you had to compare in terms of pointing out some major differences and possibly some similarities between, I mean, it's two different countries, you being schooled in Namibia and in Germany. What would you say are some of the major differences, and if there are similarities between your own education and what we do here at the school?
I think I was very focused on getting good marks. So like I was very competitive, which some of our kids are also in that category. But I see, it's hard to see myself as a child, but what I see with our two kids is they just love learning. Like they just love for the sake of learning. And I think that wasn't always the case for me. I think I was motivated by, okay, if I work hard enough, study enough, and do well in exams, then I get, the 90% or the medal or the certificate or whatever. And for them, because there isn't that immediate philosophy at the school where you don't get, the certificates. And I've seen they just doing it because they love doing it. And sometimes I wish I had that motivation, because later in life it caught up with me where I put so much of my identity into those performance kind of things that I actually had burnout, which was related to that. But I think just because I had the wrong motivation, and I can see for them that that's not their main motivation, even though one is very competitive, but I can just see she loves learning for the sake of learning. And that's one big thing I would say is different.
What's very special to me here compared to the probably solid education that I received myself is the relationships within the system of the school. So the relationships the children have within their class and with their teachers is quite intimate. And also for us as parents, how we are able to relate to the teachers and to the wider school community is very special. So even if when I have a concern, something I need to talk about with someone, it's not this anonymous parent-teacher or staff-parent relationship or teacher-parent relationship, but there is already a basis for a relationship that we can build on, and we can discuss it, and I feel I'm taken seriously as a person that has an issue or a question. So I find that much more collaborative. And for the children, what we can observe is that the way that they relate to their classes, they're usually friends with, the classes are small, but this is, one of the effects, they can be friends with the entire class. And even with the relationships they have with their teachers, I find that very special. And for us, it was, even though their teachers tend to change every year, and maybe that's the reason why they actually have a relationship with most of the teachers at the school. I find, and that's probably one of the reasons is that our classes and school sizes, or at least in my case, were much bigger. So such personal relationships at such a level were not possible back then. Yeah.
So if we just think about the girls and how you've seen them grow as two young ladies, what have you seen in them in how they've grown in terms of, you mentioned a couple of times their love for learning, but in terms of character, what are some of the I don't know if you would remember when you come for an interview, one of the questions we usually ask is what are some of the areas you would like to see your children grow in? And so when you came to the school, what were the hopes and ambitions that you had for your, not ambitions, but what were you hoping for your children to grow in, and how have you seen that in some way play out in their time here?
I think with our eldest, she's quite emotional. And so one of our hopes was that she would learn in a good way to have relationship with peers and teachers where she's able to take criticism on board and also to express herself in a helpful way. And we've definitely found that teachers, like he said, whenever we have, they often ask you this in your parent-teacher meeting as well, what can we work on together? And that has always been one thing. And the teachers have been key to guiding our daughter there to really learn, how to take criticism, or, if you do something wrong, that's not the end of the world. You can recalibrate and you can stand up, but also to listen to her. So our eldest is very rule focused, which some kids tend to be black and white, but for her, when she makes a mistake, it felt like a big thing. And the teachers have really got alongside her. I know of at least 2 who've really sat with her and say, it's not the end of the world, it's a learning opportunity. So let's move forward. And even with how she's integrated within a group of friends. So she's a leader, but I think she's really learned to take people with her in a good way, and to also find her place within the class, which was major for her. She really struggled to know how to connect. And just because of the class size, I think, and also moving forward with your friends and the guidance from the teachers, she's really become quite confident in that setting and grown to stand up for what is right, and also just to lead her class in a sense as well within her means. So that's one that sticks out for me. And the little one, I would say, is shyer. So for me, just growing in confidence of finding your voice, being able to express, which has a lot to do with the narration styles, right? But I think finding words for expressing ideas and feelings, but also how to help your classmates in that sense.
Nothing to add, really.
I'm interested to just chat about, you mentioned earlier, Annethea, your growing up and exams and the 90% and the studying hard. How have you in particular, and you too, Marcus, our approach to exams? I mean, there's a stark contrast there. How have you seen that being a positive in your children now? And again, compare it to your experience of exams at school. Just maybe tell the people out there, what has it been like, exams at the Vine School, since we are in most schools still in exam season?
Yes, I mean, I also compare it, so I work with university students. So it's this idea of just doing something to get that end result, which is the certificate or the degree. Certainly it pushes people to do that, but I think this approach to learning and also exams is it's a process of learning, and it's almost more about the journey than the destination to some extent, if that makes sense. And so even the exams, it's not about cramming as much into your mind as you can, which some do better than others, and then you measure that moment. But it's really about seeing where you're at, and then we have the other evaluation, which is more broadly focused, right, on the character, on interplay between relationships. So you have 2 focuses at the school. The one is academic and seeing where people are at, but not with cramming information in, but really seeing what have you learned, where are you at? And the other one is a more nuanced approach where you're really looking at different angles of the child and how are they doing within their means and where can they be challenged to do better. So I think that's, and the other thing is it's a lot less stressful at home, right? The studying, I often see from other families, like the exam times are so stressful because the kids now have to study for this big thing that seems so huge, that seems more important than anything else. And it leads to anxieties and other things, whereas we don't have that. I mean, our kids are excited about exams and sometimes nervous, but they really enjoy it also to come to school, to show what they know. And we often tell them, it's only a moment in time. That's not the final big thing.
I think I was similar to Annethea in that I didn't really have a problem with studying hard and with excelling or with performing in most subjects and most of the time. And even at the time back then, I realized I'm thriving because I am able to produce the required results. But so I didn't really experience such kinds of exams as stressful as it might have been for others, but I also realized that there's a downside for those who aren't able to perform as well. So I really value the approach to exams here. It doesn't mean that the standards are any lower, but it's just the approach to the way of testing knowledge and to communicating this is an opportunity to share what you have learned, rather than putting pressure on you to reach a certain standard that we are going to tell you you have to achieve. I mean, our kids, and we get it through our kids from their classmates as well. I think they still tend to stress as the older they get, but they don't even have the comparison how it is like in other schools. So we know that their stress levels are probably much lower than for others, and since we are seeing in our kids that they are learning incredibly much, in terms, not just in terms of content, but even in terms of how they, like holistic learning, how they put things together, the kind of questions we get, questions that are sometimes far beyond their age, and there's an eagerness to learn and to understand the world, and that's certainly connected to the attempts of the school to produce integrated knowledge, and I think this just is evidence to the fact that the approach to exams isn't a downside. I don't know in what way it's related to their growth in knowledge, but it's nothing that holds them back from learning. Rather, it's just another way of testing what they have actually learned.
I'm interested now to know, are there any specific instances that come to mind immediately of those times where they've come home and asked a question or told you something where you thought, where does this come from? Can you just briefly recall? I would love to hear.
Something that comes to mind, we were on the way home from school, and I don't remember how, but we started talking about the insurance business and economy, and how insurance works, and why we have certain kinds of insurance, why not, and how, like the business model of an insurance. They wanted to know more, like how does it work? When do you have a right on a payout, or when not? And how is the money that the insurance gets distributed among the beneficiaries, and like, all these things. I don't know where that came from, but that was quite interesting. Yeah. And there were other. I don't know. I have to think of it a little. Sometimes there are these subjects which are entirely new, and I'm sure they haven't got. Well, politics is another area. We do sometimes tend to talk politics at the dinner table, and then the kids trying to make sense of that, and then asking questions maybe sometime later. Like ask, is Donald Trump a dictator? And then you talk about what a dictator is, and how that fits into their worldview, and what they know of the world currently, and things like that. And then obviously in our case also like negotiating their identity as children that Emma was born in South Africa, is or wasn't, but with their parents coming from two different countries and now living in a third country, and what that. So it's all related to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, others are just things they pick up on playtime, and probably also Bible, like, if the devil, if God is almighty, why doesn't he make the devil good? So there's these big questions that you come up with, and I'm sure many kids ask many kind of questions, but we see them, if you give them opportunities to ask and you engage with them, I think you see that they're used to engaging ideas and talking about things, and have the opportunity to ask questions, and even have the teacher say, I don't know everything, but sort of guiding them and giving them a framework to think of these big issues, related to God, but also to the world and how it works, and people, and art and music, and all these different kind of things. I think it's just that we experience they have a framework that allows them to engage with us, because they learn it here at school.
And even, very recently, that was this morning, we discussed the current spats of xenophobia in the country, and so they asked questions about that as well, because they had an interest of better understanding what is going on and making sense of it all.
So So you guys have read some of the texts that they read in the class. Maybe just share with us, what are some of the things that struck you as you engage with the texts alongside your children? Yeah, what are some comments of what it is that they are exposed to, some comments on it, what struck you, some of the ideas, and what kind of discussions has that prompted at home as well?
I mean, leave the history books for him because he's been reading them. For me, for me, just I spoke when we met with Earl. I spoke about one of the real highlights. I think something that I find very good is the use of story to teach here. And so you have the big story of the Bible, which they get, and everything else is placed within that story. And so I know Emma last year read a book on Desmond Tutu. I think it's Desmond Tutu or something about the bad word. But I think just learning through story is so much more personal. I know that Emma has cried at times in class from the teacher, and I'm sure other kids, because of the emotional impact of story in teaching big ideas, and then the teacher obviously always guiding them to deal with that and understand that. But I think within the bigger story of the Bible, of who I am, of people, and so I think just story and the text used here to look at people in all their complexities and to put that in the context for them, and to really see, especially history. I mean, he can speak about that, but for the way we learned it was often just, dates and events, whereas they really get into the stories, they see the complexities, they see the people, and I think it has a big impact in how they understand these events that happen. It's not just a date and a name, but really dive into what actually happened and how people were affected. And I think it's very powerful the way some of these stories are used in school.
So one of my academic backgrounds is in reconciliation research, and I was involved in reconciliation research in the context of the church here in Cape Town. And what's been interesting for us from the beginning at the Vine School is that there's such a mixture of children and families in the classes. And this is a great opportunity, but also a great challenge. How do you teach? How do you get everyone on the same page? Is that even possible? To what extent do you allow their own knowledges from the various languages and cultures they come from to be part of the classroom activities? But history is one aspect of that, and I was really interested in, and I am interested in reading with them what they are taught at school. So I've over the last couple of years I've read the history books that they do in class during that year, and maybe two things stand out for me. One was that the history books are, first of all, interesting. Similar to what Annethea just said, they are written in story form. So history is taught through stories. In this case, it's often this. What's the word? It's like a consecutive telling of the story, in this case of South Africa, or even of the world. And there was one history book, I think it was last year, maybe grade 4, where it was very much about the history of the coming from the Middle Ages to the Enlightenment, and then the colonial era, and Europeans starting to colonize different parts of the world. And in as much as the story form of the book is probably a helpful way to learn, I found the perspective of the book quite Eurocentric and not in some areas not very sensitive to the perspectives and experiences of people who had to suffer the colonization. So I asked the teacher about it, and I was really intrigued by her response, because she acknowledged that the way this particular book was written was not necessarily very sensitive to everyone's sensitivities. But she said this is a great opportunity for us to engage these issues, and we talk about them in class. And when a story is told about, for example, Columbus having discovered and appropriated the lands that he found in America, they problematize it. And is this the right approach to meet another people, to meet new people, and to claim their land as his or for his king and things like that? So this approach I find fascinating and appropriate. So deal critically with the literature that is being read, but then also knowing that obviously, especially recently, South African history has been very contested in the way it is taught. So reading the books that Ambleside South Africa has produced to teach particularly South African history, I found intriguing because it sort of gave a counter narrative to what was taught or what had been taught before. But I mean, I'm also speaking as a white foreign male person, so we're always situated in a particular setting and perspective. But I found this probably gave a much more balanced view of things, and for example, just without overemphasizing these things, but placing, if you read South African history in story form, and you read about Jan van Riebeeck coming to Cape Town and setting up this trading station in the colony, but you read that within the history and of what has happened before, a couple of chapters already you've been looking at people at the Cape. So realize there has been 150 years of history between Europeans and indigenous populations here, and Jan van Riebeeck just inserts himself in this history. It's not as if he is now the founder of this nation. So it's more an organic approach to viewing history, which I'm sure sparks a lot of conversation in the class, because then you have I don't know how many different cultural linguistic identities you have sitting in each classroom, but it's a great diversity, and then people will probably reflect on these things from their own perspectives, from the perspectives of their families and cultures. So I think this is a very rich environment and a great way of engaging with history.
Yeah, so the thoughts that you shared and the questions they ask you kind of almost think in the back of my mind, people that are listening, they need to keep in mind that it's a grade 2 and a grade 5, children that we're talking about, just to keep that in mind, because it's almost like you would expect probably the children are in high school or something if you look at some of the things that they were discussing. Maybe just as a few closing thoughts, looking ahead at the years that they still have left at the school, what are some of the hopes and dreams that you have for them, and how do you see us as a school being part of that and seeing them grow into all the God has called them to be, and also maybe perhaps what has been your experience of how well it works if school and parents align in terms of philosophy?
Sure. I think probably as all parents, it was training on the job. So we've just tried to keep up with the new needs arising year after year, and speak for me, I don't even know how far in the future I am able to look in respect of our girls. What are my hopes and dreams? Maybe they are there, but I haven't really explored them much. I think we probably want them to be competent in relating to different kinds of people, and to be very aware of history, of especially in South Africa, of the different socio-political constellations this country comes with, the different challenges that come with it, to have empathy, to keep their desire for learning and for understanding themselves and their context and the lives of other people, to have we see that, and we hope that this will be cultivated further, that they have a love and concern for other people, especially for those close to them, their class, the school environment, but maybe then even beyond that. And that they develop an interest to build on the foundation, including their faith foundation, which they get from church, family, school, and to integrate that with all the other areas of knowledge, so that they, going forward into adulthood, become people who are able to integrate all these areas and become mature in faith and life as young Christians that emerge into a life where they have to carry responsibilities for themselves.
Yeah, I think to build on that, so at the Student YMCA where I work, we want to challenge students, Christian students at UCT, to think about faith-life integration. So really saying your faith has something to say for every aspect of your life. And I think that's what the Vine School also try and do, what I find powerful now. So he said at the beginning, we didn't really aim for a Christian school, but now that we've been here to really, so we're at home, we're at church, we're living our faith, we're getting to know God and Jesus, but the school context is so unique in that, and it relates to my work, to really see, okay, the teachers are at work here, the students are learning, and and they're engaging their peers and other things, where does all this fit in with their faith? And I think a place like the Vine School really bridges that gap much earlier than some of the students that I'm working with. So, I mean, what I find powerful is sometimes having the teachers say devotions and really sharing their faith journey and seeing what God is doing in their lives. And for the kids, they see them in the classroom in moments filled with conflict, I'm sure, and not everybody's paying attention. The teacher has to teach. She's a person, she makes mistakes, maybe they not always at their best. And so there's this unique mixture of what does the faith look like in this context, which is a working context, often a life, this normal life. And I find that testimony and interplay unique, and what we would want to continue here at the school for you guys to do is for them to really see the faith has to do with every aspect of their lives. You know, he's talking about the big context, South Africa, the world, but also interpersonal relationships and dealing with conflicts and dealing with, I'm not always at my best, I make mistakes, but God's grace is big. And to look to the future, my career one day that is not independent from my faith in God and who God made me to be and the gifts that He given me. And, I can explore that. I can look forward to living and working in the world for God. And I think the school is uniquely placed to challenge the kids in that manner, because it's not a church and it's not a family. It's sort of a mixture in between, and really dealing with sort of knowledge and worldly stuff, but also saying that is actually all part of our faith journey. And God cares about the books we read, about the plants He created, about music, and, all of this stuff. And it's all part of our journey with Him. It's not disconnected from each other. So I think that's what we would wish for them to continue to learn. And I think it's one of the unique abilities of a school like the Vine School is to teach them from early on that there is this life and faith is interconnected, and it's a beautiful thing.
Not sure whether I can add something of an idea, maybe. I mentioned earlier that there's this great diversity of cultures, of linguistic, national backgrounds at the school, which is an asset. But I think it's probably not easy for a school that has to have a certain medium, a language to teach, to do justice to the various knowledges that the learners already bring with them from home. And of course, there's Afrikaans classes, there's Xhosa classes, and the children are able to be exposed a little bit to these other languages, for example. But I think there's still so much more to explore and to learn. For example, speaking about faith, what does faith practice actually look like from the perspective of another language? What do the words that we use in English, are they even translatable into another language, and how are they expressed and lived out? And I hope that it's probably a challenge, because even the social life within the school is mostly governed by English. And my hope is that the relationships our girls and other learners form would make space for the world that exists outside of English, and that they would allow, or maybe welcome each other within their own spheres, within their own cultural worlds, beyond the English that seems to be the universal, but it actually isn't. So that's a hope I have. I'm not sure to what extent the school would, or a school would be able to do justice to that, but not to forget about that. This dimension, I think, is something that's important, especially in a school like this.
Yeah, absolutely. That is probably one of the biggest areas where most schools can grow in. Like you say, it's in various educational contexts not an easy thing to make enough space for, if I can put it that way. I know I said closing thoughts, but I have one closing question to our audience. If you had to, how can I put it? If you had to say to Christian or non-Christian parents who are considering education for their children, one or two critical non-negotiables, what would that be if they are out there looking?
So advice for those people on how to pick a school, or what is important.
If there are people looking, considering maybe changing schools, starting their school journey, knowing what your thought processes, etc., and specifically to anyone, whether they're Christian or non-Christian, what would some advice be as from parent to parent? What would you say to them?
I think, speaking just from looking at all sort of education systems, one thing I would say is, like I said before, we have this drive towards achievement, this drive towards building our identity on, the best job, the best car, the best house, the best education, the best certificate. And it almost, if you're speaking biblical terms, it almost seems like it's become an idol to just have that as a background. Whereas I think if I look at what will change societies, what will change the world, is really having a focus on people and relationships, and like I said before, discovering what God has placed in each unique individual. We're all made in the image of God, separately and individually. And what does that mean to shape the world for Him, for Christ? Okay, that's maybe not for non-Christians, but for Christians in particular. Just have that vision of what really does it look like that God is building a kingdom in this world, and if you start exploring that, you discover it looks a lot different to what we set as goals, what we think we need, where we need to go. And I think, especially Christian parents, I would encourage them to explore that. And what do you want your kids to shape their life around? Because achievements will all, in the end, fade. We're part of a bigger story, back to story, but our lives are valuable, but also finite in a sense. And so is having that picture of what do I really want my child to achieve in this world. And sometimes it's very ordinary things, just, being kind to people, respecting other people, standing up for what's right, and helping others that I see are in need, and also at the same time exploring the gifts that God has placed in me and finding a job and building my life around that in a good, honest way. So for Christians, I would definitely say that, maybe even for other parents, just to evaluate what we think we're driving towards, because those things will actually, they're fleeting and they will go away. And maybe there's a bigger vision, and that is changing the world for the better in the Christian context. That's building God's kingdom in a non-Christian world. It's just, back to Christian language, but when God created, the creation had shalom, and that means everything was whole and in relation with each other. Everybody had enough, everybody was happy, and that was his vision for the world. And now we're in a post-sin fall period, but yet his vision is still one of peace, which we translate peace, but it's actually that shalom, bringing things and relationships back to where he intended it to be. And I think it's a much, I work with students who, you can see them fading because what is the vision? And I think if we set the vision on personal achievement or bigger cars or bigger houses, I think we always have that empty feeling. But I think if we're working on a vision that's much bigger than ourselves and that, leads somewhere, I think it gives us purpose.
I'd probably highlight an environment where children are at ease and where they are able to thrive. So where they can feel, here I feel accepted, I feel loved, I feel secure. That's an environment where I can thrive, and then academic achievements will follow after that. But this is like the foundation for any good education, I think. That is also, as Annethea just said, not just education for achievement's sake, but that's holistic, that places a high value on the development of character as well. So finding an environment where this is possible, where children are happy, even when a child tells you Friday evening, I wish it was Monday, then I would be able to see my friends again. And then you feel you've made the right decision.
Sure. Yeah, imagine finishing work on a Friday and saying, I wish it was Monday. Sure. Thank you. Any other thoughts or things that you wanted to share but I didn't ask about, or any closing comments, thoughts from your side? You're welcome. Otherwise, I don't have any more questions.
I think there's one thing that when I was traveling a bit, people talked about Christian education, and I asked them, what do you mean? And I said, for me, one of the biggest things at the school was when I was with teachers who prayed for my child at the parent-teacher meeting, but even in assemblies. And I think, we underestimate the powerful thing that is it expresses love in a way that almost transcends a lot of other things for me, knowing that this teacher is saying, I can't do it in my own strength, and I'm doing it with God, and I'm bringing every child individually before God. I think if I had to pick one highlight among many in the school, it was that, to just see, because that's a love relationship that is not just between two people, it incorporates God, and just to know that is the attitude that the teachers come to school with, I think that's big.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, is that it? Sorry, I was in the zone there. Thank you both very much. Really appreciate it.
It blesses my heart to have these conversations with people. It just reminds us of how important it is, what we do. So thank you.
Thank you for what you're doing.